Hello and welcome. Well, if the life experience of living through a pandemic has taught us anything, it's to appreciate what's important in life. Slowing down to enjoy quality time outdoors in the elements, in experiencing the sights and the senses was most definitely one of them. Now, for many of us, it's really awakened, I guess, the primal instincts ingrained within us as a reminder of our deep rooted connection to Mother Earth and all living things. So today we will do all our best to reawaken some of those reminders, in particular how they relate to the well-being and education of our children. We will be speaking about the benefits of outdoors and what lessons it provides children, along with how and why we should continue to integrate daily outdoor activities into our lives to experience the natural world post-COVID and beyond. So to talk to us about this today, really thrilled to welcome back our special guest, Sally Gillespie. Now, Sally is a writer and lecturer in the field of eco-psychology and climate psychology. She gained her PhD at Western Sydney University, researching the psychological experience of engaging with climate issues. She then wrote her book, Climate Crisis and Consciousness, Reimagining Our World and Ourselves to make what she learned accessible to the general public. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Rachel. I'm just delighted to be back here with you. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, well, as I said, I'm really extremely grateful for your time and to be speaking about this topic. And it's something that I, in preparation for the chat today, had really thought about. Everybody had really appreciated their time outdoors during lockdown. And now that life has slowly returned to a new sense of normal, and the busyness and the stress of life, in many different forms has sort of crept back into our lives. For many of us, we may have forgotten about those precious moments when we really did appreciate the outdoors. So this is something that I'm really passionate about speaking to you about today, and about, as a gentle reminder, how we all can integrate what we learnt during lockdown into our lives, along with the benefits for children. But initially, I'd love to understand from your perspective how you can see that the COVID experience changed families' relationship with the outdoors.
Well, I think it took COVID and particularly lockdown, of course, to really appreciate what the outdoors gives us and how essential it is for a sense of well-being. I live opposite a park, so I was really able to watch the whole thing close up. During lockdowns and the slow unwinding of lockdown, how much more of those parks have been used. And I would say that has continued to some extent, because I think the big lesson that came is that when you take your kids to the park and you are there too, interacting with them, and I saw a lot more parent-child interaction in parks going on during COVID, the children blossom. The children were just so happy to be outside with a parent's attention, looking at bushes, looking at the birds, having adventures, and all the rest. And I would certainly say, from the perspective of the neighbourhood I live in, the outdoor areas have become a lot more enlivened. What I would like to see parents have taken from that is really not only that they felt better for getting outside regularly with the children, but how the children thrived, and how helpful it is in parent-child relations if you can join in to a mutual sense of exploration, adventure, awe and wonder in interacting with the living world around us.
Yes. Well, there's lots to delve into. I just wanted to acknowledge initially that we published your article titled Outdoor Education, A School for Life. Now, for someone who hasn't read the article yet, can you please tell us what it's about, and of course, just what inspired you to write it?
Well, it was initially that sense of watching people get outside and being very struck about the changing quality of the relating going on there. But really, I wanted to then link it to the value of outdoor education.
Yes.
It's something that's starting to catch on here. It's quite big in the UK and in parts of Europe and the US. And it really, it's a bit of a no-brainer that, of course, if you get children outside more, they will be healthier, they'll be more stimulated, And there will be many benefits that come out of that outdoor education, and it has now been very well documented. So I really wanted to write about some of this and to bring this up into parents' attention, both so it encourages that increased looking at how you can do outdoor learning yourself and your families, but also how to encourage it through preschools and schools.
Wonderful. I'd love to know from your perspective, what does the outdoors teach our young ones then?
Well, this is partly from my perspective, but it's also from evidence-based research, which we
Yes.
now have a growing amount of. So what we're observing in children is certainly that they develop a sense of awe and wonder and curiosity and connection with the living world. And this is an incredibly important thing because we are animals. We live because our world lives. And as we know, we've got an ecological crisis going on. These young ones today are going to be having a lot of their life defined by the ways that they are going to be working to heal ecological ecosystems and ecological habitats and so on. And to have that commitment and that interest, you need to have that early sense of awe and wonder in the living world. We also have a lot of research now which just shows how much more children will thrive when they have outdoor learning experiences as well as times outdoors generally. What we see is an increase of attention, increase of confidence. We see greater emotional resilience and ability to self-regulate or to look after oneself. Because the sense of play and adventure outside, where not everything is monitored and set up, but there is a sense of being able to do free play and imagination, all feeds into an ability to develop greater creativity and greater resilience. We also see increase in social skills. Children often play together outside, and at the end, because it's not all set up for them, they have to negotiate with one another about how to go about building a fort together or constructing a fantasy or adventure or whatever. There's also, at a physical health level, a lot of benefits. Immune systems benefit when we're outside more. We now know that our gut microbiome needs contact with the living world, with soil particularly, that way we get a better gut biota, and that feeds directly into not only physical well-being and immune systems, but also mental well-being. There's a lot of evidence there. So, this is what research often tells us, which is what common sense tells us, that a child who can get outside and play and develop, again, sensory motor coordination skills and all those sorts of things, and that ability to explore through creative play is a healthier and happier child. And there is just so much evidence now to show that that's really true.
Mm-hmm. I would love to know also, can time spent outdoors help boost children's academic performances? And if so, how?
Well, the concentration's a big one. Children as we know, are full of energy and curiosity. And if they can go outside and explore and let off some physical steam, but also because children are naturally very fascinated by nature. So if you do some of your teaching out there, maybe a bug identification sheet, a bird identification sheet, those are learning skills that they can then take back into the classroom. But what they also take back into the classroom is confidence. So what we're seeing increasingly in the UK is that children from underprivileged backgrounds are being given time and forest skills, and they come back into the classroom and they do much better academically because of all the skills and the confidence they have developed outdoors, as well as possibly for some of those children, just being able to have that physical activity helps them to settle.
Now, in your article, you share some wonderful ideas that parents can use to help their children to get the most of their outdoor education. I'd love for you just to share a few of those with us now. And the first one you mentioned in the article is to check out if there's any bush kindergarten or schools accessible that may run some out of school programs. Could you maybe just expand on that for a moment?
Yes, at present, there's not a great, there are some bush kinders and
Yes. Yep.
I think one or two bush schools in Australia, but that's pretty rare. So you'd be very lucky to find one in your neighbourhood. And if you are, grab it. But what is developing is that there are often either school holiday programs or after school programs which give children of different ages some of that outdoor learning experience. I know there's some running up in the Blue Mountains. I'm in Sydney, but check out your area because it is, you know, it is the sort of preference children will have if given the option. But you have to get in early because, of course, children can get very addicted to screens. And we know that screens, the iPads, the iPhones, all of that have been purposely designed to be addictive. So you need to get your child out there early to have that experience and reinforce the positive experience to help build that incentive to then go to bush kinders and so on. But generally, if you get the children there young, they're really, really happy with that. The alternative, of course, is that in the preschools or schools that your children are, is to really be an advocate and lobby for that kind of outdoor space and to value it.
Yes.
And it's really important that parents bring that message to the schools because often the schools and teachers feel very pressured about the child should be learning behind the desk in the classroom at every moment to get those you know, NAPLAN or 8 hours or whatever. And that's, you know, that's not understood that the children will do better academically if they actually have quite a bit of their learning be outdoor learning.
Yes, you do mention that parent support is really vital in implementing
Yes.
the curriculum changes as well. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. The other thing is to look for school and holiday programs which just have an outdoor focus in general as well,
Yep.
which is not just the OSH, the out of school hours care, but this is just the school holiday programs as well. And once again, I'm assuming just for parents, obviously, to be looking for their local areas as well as for what's available.
Yeah. Well, that's right, because not all schools are equal in this way. And I mean, and that is part of some of the inequity issues we might see, where a private school might have, you know, huge playing fields and all sorts of different outdoor environments that the kids can go out and learn in, whereas another school might be very poor and maybe just have some asphalt to run around. And so then it's a matter of supporting excursions that will take the children a bit further afield.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at that, because that I think is an equity issue, and it's also a matter then of, again, if parents can step in a bit and back teachers who want to take the kids out on excursions, which usually need parent support to happen. That's another way to bring that about. I mean, it's not that children need huge amounts of space necessarily, but the more life there is in the, you know, there's trees and plants and shrubs which will bring insects and birds, that all helps. Another form of outdoor interaction that can happen through schools is through gardening. And a lot more schools, even if they've only got raised garden beds, it's still an opportunity to talk about how does the seed grow? What happens when we put compost in the soil? How do we make compost? I've had some lovely interactions with the preschoolers up the road. They come to my community garden. We look at how we make compost. I go up there and we plant seeds. And the children at 3 are so excited to garden, and they're so ready to learn about every part of it. What does the compost do? Which, you know, will the food be the leaf or will it be the root? And, you know, all those different things. So children are real sponges at that age. Yes. And if we have to decide what we want them to absorb, I think it's a great idea to absorb, you know, how they breathe, how their food happens, and all those basic experiences of life.
Yeah, and I love in the article you mentioned also with outdoor excursions to things like zoos and national parks as well, for them to be able to have identification games or spotting games. There's apps and all kinds of things like that as well. So that can sort of just keep them engaged throughout that as well. And I mean, overall then, so what do you see that our children can actually learn from the outdoor activities and through play then?
They can learn about the world that makes them and enables them to live. And so it's the most basic, as you said at the beginning, primal learning. And it gives them a sense of being part of something larger, and it gives them a sense of groundedness and place. And I think both a sense of awe about how the living world produces the incredible diversity and variety it does, but also a bit of a sense of humility too, which I think doesn't go astray in terms of understanding that we're part of this larger system. And also that real connection with animals, which again children have so naturally, and to bring that interest into a lively curiosity. And yeah, there's some fabulous citizen science programs which are orientated towards children to help them learn a bit more about the insects that pollinate our plants, which make it possible for us to have food to eat, and all those kinds of things.
So, I mean, how else then can parents increase children's outdoor learning? You know, we've mentioned a few of the things in your article, enrolling in different programs and attending things like zoos and national parks. Is there anything else in
I
addition to
just
that
think,
at all?
yeah, I think on a daily living is it's you know, as ever, children learn from their parents, not only what you say but what you do. So it's like if you're walking to school, maybe take some time to see if you can identify the trees that you might walk past. If you see a bird, draw your child's attention to the bird. What is the bird doing? Is the bird looking for food? Is the bird making a nest? Is there a baby bird round? If you show a real curiosity, and that doesn't mean you know it all, you might go, well, let's go home and see if we can find what that tree or that bird is called. That will tell your child that that's important, and it's a really lovely, rich part of life. And you know, often we can get very caught up in things which are very not grounded in the natural world at all, and it can leave us feeling a bit more anxious, to be honest, unless we are grounded. Yeah.
No, this is all part of a much bigger conversation. And as we've had conversations and interviews previously, you know, and as I was mentioning before, you know, thankfully, much of our lives have returned back to a normal or a new sense of normal, should I say. But it really feels to me, Sally, that, you know, I think it's important for us to be really mindful and cognitive of the lessons as human beings that we've learnt over the past 18 months, in particular, about the impact the environment has on our lives. And of course, the world that we're leaving for our children. I just love to know from your perspective, and I mean, do you think it's important that we continue having conversations like this as a reminder that none of these problems are a quick fix, and we really do need to put sort of consistent attention and diligence and focus towards the importance of the environment? I'd love to know.
Absolutely, Rachel. You put it very well. And I think that other link there, which perhaps I haven't emphasised enough, is that with that can come conversations about how do we care for this. You know, once there are more birds, we've got to look after the birds we have. How do we look after birds? Well, we plant trees and shrubs that those birds like. And so rather than turning it into a very anxious conversation about, you know, how badly the world is doing at an ecological level, it could be an opportunity to have a conversation about how can we care? How can we care so those birds are happy? Or how can we grow our own food and learn about growing our own food, so that we have a greater sense of that, the importance of that, and not just taking that for granted, or not understanding when we go to the supermarket where that food's come from. And then there can be conversations about the farmers and how farmers are part of us getting our food, and what we could do to perhaps support farmers who are looking at regenerative agriculture, who are taking special care of their land. So these conversations can get larger and larger according to how old your child is. But they're only conversations you can have with your child if you yourself show that curiosity and yeah, do the same sorts of outdoor learning. I think it's something we need to do at every age.
Yes, yes. It really is, for me, a reminder that it's our generation's responsibility to do everything that we can, really, to protect the planet for our children and generations to come. Some of the destruction is, I mean, you would know, obviously, much more than I will ever. I mean, is some of the damage irreversible? Can these things be fixed and or not? I don't know.
I think a very important message for children as well as for ourselves is that the living world is by its nature, just as we are, because we're part of the living world, are regenerative. Now, it's unlikely we can go back to restoring the world to as it was. There's been, and the natural world is always changing. The kind of changes that the human activities have brought have been pretty intense over the last 50 years particularly, but we can work regeneratively and to repair our ecosystems. And every bit of attention and learning we bring to that is very rewarding. And we love those stories where we see a wetland coming back or a species that was about to go extinct build its numbers and things. This is the great story of our time, and this is the great mission of our time. And we need to educate our children around that, but that's going to be a big part of their purpose here. And what a rewarding purpose to aid life in recovering and repairing when it has been damaged out of all sorts of reasons, including ignorance.
I'd love to know, as a follow-on from that, do you think that, with everything that we've lived through, in 2020 and in the last 18 months, as I just referenced earlier, with bushfires, drought, climate disruption, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a lot really when you think about it. But through all of this, that there has been some form of a shift in consciousness about the need for action and to protect the environment, or not? I'd just love to know overall, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's always a bit hard when we say we, because there are so many different
Of course, yes,
cultures and so on. But I do feel there has been, if we look at mainstream culture, what I see in social media, I think there is a shift of consciousness. I think not everyone understands the mechanics of it, but the pandemic has been identified as a zoonotic disease, which has come out of ecological disruption. So there is a sense, I think, that the out of balanceness of how we have been living and the kind of destructions that have come out of ignorance and at times greed cannot keep going on. There is a limit to it. But shifts of consciousness don't happen overnight. They're a process. And we have to understand that there are also cultural mechanisms and political mechanisms that want to hold on to the old. There's both an inertia, there's a fear of change, and there's also vested interests, where some have done much better out of actually having quite a destructive way of proceeding. And so it's a lot to process. And so I think most of us grasp that we can't continue the whole techno-industrial kind of way of living without really coming to grips with ecological understandings and ecosystemic repair. What we need is, again, a lot of education and leadership to then be able to harness that into some changes, which really overall are going to be so beneficial. Not only because they're going to, pull us back from the very worst of catastrophes, but because actually we will be happier when we're not so caught up in a very competitive and consumerist culture, which is ungrounded and disconnected from the living world. And this is where, of course, we have a great deal to learn from our own Indigenous cultures, which carry such a different worldview and such a deep knowledge of the way our ecosystems work.
Couldn't agree with you anymore. And I think that's a conversation for another day that I'd love to be able to expand on more with you, and how we can integrate sort of children's learning and education through that also. But just, I guess, to wrap up our conversation today, how would you summarize, I guess, the key messages for anyone watching and listening? And what would you like sort of parents to walk away as a takeaway from the interview today?
I'd like them to take their child out to their favourite outdoor place and really be with their child, put away the phone, and follow the children a little bit into what they want to explore or what they want to play, to actually learn what their child enjoys doing out there, and to follow whatever interest up with encouragement and so on. And I would like also to have that chat with the school and the teachers about how you really value outdoor learning, and would like to see your child
Yes,
having more of that integrated in their education.
Well, a child that is passionate about the environment, no doubt, will grow to an adult that is equally as passionate about supporting it in the future. So we all have to start
Absolutely.
somewhere. So I'm very grateful for your time today and for all the information and the wisdom that you've shared with us. If anyone's got any questions and would like to reach out to you and or to buy your book, whereabouts can they find you?
Look, yeah, I think you've got my handles. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on Facebook.
Wonderful. We'll have all of those in the show notes. Thank you again for your time, and I can't wait to chat with you again in the not too distant future. Take care.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been a great pleasure.
Okay, bye.